Bud Light presents Real Men of Genius.
Real men of genius.
Today we salute you, Mr. Way Too Proud of Texas Guy.
Mr. Way Too Proud of Texas Guy.
Men from lesser states may know their state's capital, but you know your state's bird, tree, and even reptile.
Love that horny toad.
You display your pride with your Lone Star tattoo, native Texan bumper sticker, and contempt for any state that doesn't start with Tex and end with is.
That spells Texas.
Sure, there are 49 other states in the Union, but they're smaller, wussier, and the people talk funny.
Yankee wussy.
So crack open an ice cold Bud Light, oh lover of the Lone Star State, because all that flag waving must have made you mighty thirsty.
Mr. Way Too Proud of Texas
Bud Light beer,
Guy.
Anheuser-Busch, Houston, Texas.
Big Chief and Big Train. It's 18th of June, 1925, as President Calvin Coolidge hands Walter Johnson coveted award. Johnson of Washington Senators has been chosen most valuable player in American League. Well-deserved honor for famed pitcher.
The next 2-2. Davis to left and will hit. Oh my! It's gone! Santa Maria!
From high atop the Robinson Gearing Studio Complex and straight out of God's country, Pawleys Island, South Carolina, the Let's Talk Baseball Podcast Network proudly presents Backwards K-Pod. And now, here's the host of the show, Jake Robinson.
I never move in slow-mo. Welcome to my dojo. Those other parts are so-so. I'm chew like Froyo. Focus like a GoPro. Ripping up this promo. Check out the scoreboard. Preach. I'm throwing no-nos. It's going. Yo, it's gone. Your heart just stopped. Cause Jake got strong and mighty. Undefeated. I mean it. Pull up the pod. Scroll it down. Then read it. Written, produced, directed, and mixed. Dung on your lips and Ozzie Smith backflips. Pick a tip. Any tip. Get onto it. I got ridiculous pods without forcing it. You sit at home cry like a girl while I spread the gospel around the world. Yo, the pods are written behind tracks that mixed in smooth with the groove to make ears want to listen. Add a little cut and a rhythm to back it up. Another show to my name, now watch me stack them up. You think another white rap back, but this ain't no act jack. My hobby's to rhyme, some people try to be black, but dang, about time I come out, call the show PKP and let me turn it out. Yo, name Jake the Snake, born in 71. Dates, you know what time it is, I'm packing them guns. Yo, experience, I've been a witness to glory. And that's why I collect ball players and their stories. You heard? So, once again, back is the incredible, the pod animal, Jake the Snake Robinson from the Let's Talk Baseball Podcast Network. I'm coming out of Pawleys Island, South Kakalaki, half man, half podcast machine. Back in the Captain Kirk chair, shields down, photons up. Prepare to engage on this week's digital audio program that I call Backwards K-Pop, where we collect ball players and their stories. What's cracking, you cement freaks? What's Gucci? Welcome back into the dojo for yet another week of the Baseball Podcast Show spanning the globe. It's Tuesday, folks. So that means BKP is set to invade your ear holes. As every week I like to go sit in the dojo, pontificate the history of the game, the history of the seams with you fine freaks, and get down to the brass tacks as I dissect the characters, pop culture moments, and stadiums that have been woven into the history of baseball and the DNA fabric of America. Hello, everybody. It's your boy, Jake the Snake Robinson. I got your hook up. Holler if you hear me. And it's kind of a bittersweet moment for me as the World Series trophy will reside in the state of Texas for a second year in a row as the Rangers choke out the Diamondbacks in 5 games to hoist the crown. And I say bittersweet moment for me, because this truly might have been my favorite baseball season in the 2000s. Everything just kind of went off the fucking rails. Nothing went to script. And the Texas Rangers winning the World Series, it just feels appropriate after the MLB season that all of us team heads have witnessed. I'm sad to see it go away. I really felt like I fell in love with the game all over again this year, and what can I say about the Rangers? I mean, they flat out earned it. And in the end, they were the best team in baseball. They went through 3 tough teams in Tampa, Baltimore, and Houston. I mean, they won all 4 games in the juice box. They played against their in-state bullies in the Astros. They had an elite run differential. Matter of fact, the only team with a higher one during the season was Atlanta. Bruce Bochy has proven that you can come back and knock the roots of that shit. He's one of the all-time greats. His work in the post was stellar. They overcame injuries. Evan Carter is a pimp. And the trades they made for Jordan Montgomery, Max Scherzer, picking up Chapman, Chris Stratton to solidify the suspect staff and Bully. They were just stellar moves by the front office. And it gave Bochy much needed depth in the post. Corey Seager, straight up badass. World Series MVP. I'm thinking my boy Gunnar Henderson has that ability to be that type of player. A lot of similarities there. And the Arizona Snakes, you got nothing to hang your heads about. They just ran into a white-hot chainsaw. And the Snakes, their future is very bright, and they give teams like me, a fan of the Orioles, they give us hope. Money is not the equalizer anymore. The game is evolving. That's why you saw Tampa Bay, Miami, Milwaukee, Baltimore. Seattle just barely missed it. The game is evolving. So, you know, the Snakes, they got nothing to hang their heads about. Congratulations to the Texas Rangers and their fans around the globe for their first World Series championship in franchise history. And before I dip into this week's story, I would be remiss if I didn't put out some sad news from the week since the last time I held court. And it's kind of ironic that it has a connection to the champion Rangers, as well as the team we'll be focusing in on this week, the Washington Senators. And before there was White Sox legend, the Big Hurt, Frank Thomas, there was another slugger named Frank Thomas who played during the 60s and 70s. His name was Frank Thomas for the Dodgers, the Senators, the Rangers. In his prime, he stood 6'7", he weighed 255 pounds, a huge man amongst the peers of his era, a Bunyan-esque type player who crushed some of baseball's more prolific home runs in his career, while also rolling up prodigious strikeout numbers, unable to ever conquer his penchant for chasing bad pitches. He died in a hospital in Aldie, Virginia on October 30th from complications from a stroke he suffered. Frank played 16 seasons in the league, amassing 382 home runs, and many of them are unforgettable. As a Dodger in 1960, he hit a ball clear out of the expanse of Forbes Field over the left field wall that was later found alongside a parked car some 560 feet away from home plate. Howard drove in 1,119 runs in his career, but he also struck out 1,460 times. That kind of sounds like a ball player in the 21st century. Some of the outfield seats at RFK Stadium in D.C. were painted white, denoting some of his more memorable blasts, to which Frank would say in his wry, self-deprecating way that all the ones painted green symbolize all the times he struck out. He was nicknamed Hondo after Hondo Lane, the character played by John Wayne in the 1953 Western movie classic Hondo. While playing for the Senators, he was called the Capital Punisher. And I'm pretty sure we'll be adding old Hondo to our collection one day. But I would be remiss if we didn't give him his due this week posthumously. Frank Thomas, Hondo, the Capital Punisher. Rest in peace. Godspeed. And time will not dim the glory of your deeds. And freaks, it looks like the catcher is ready to throw down. The umpire has called play ball. The infield throwing that seed around. Let's clear the platform here at Terrapin Station. Kiss your hug and hug your loved ones goodbye. I'm calling all aboard. And let's load up our BKP time travel choo-choo as I will be taking you back. In fact, the BKP time travel choo-choo will be meeting the big train. Walter Johnson. And I want you guys to find a comfortable spot on the train. Open your kimonos as we bend space and time to bear witness to one of the greatest pitchers who ever lived, Walter Big Train Johnson. Now, I gotta be honest with you, I don't dare go through Kansas where our story begins, especially at the turn of the century as the Dust Bowl. It's going to wreak havoc on the delicate instruments of our time travel choo-choo here, so I'll be setting our time and destination for 1902, Olinda, California. And while we traverse time to get to our destination, how about a little backstory about the great Walter Johnson? On August 2nd, 1907, after watching rookie pitcher Walter Johnson and his Washington Senators fall in defeat to the eventual AL pennant-winning Tigers 3-2 in his Major League debut, sports writer Frank Graham penned the words, "Beyond a doubt, the greatest pitcher to ever scuff a rubber with his spikes." And even the immortal Ty Cobb said after the game that his fastball made him flinch, and it hissed at him with danger. 20 years later, after his last pitch in the majors had been thrown, his recorded stats were beyond belief, and they set the benchmark for pitching in the new century and for the hurlers of the future to aspire for. 417 wins, 3,509 strikeouts, 110 shutouts. 12 seasons with 20 more wins, 11 seasons with an ERA below 2. And let's not forget, 531 complete games and 666 starts. And as superlative as the big train's statistical numbers prove him out to be, in a world where maybe only a handful of people are left who saw him compete, legendary DC sports writer, Hall of Famer Shirley Povitz wrote, "Walter Johnson, more than any other ball player, probably more than any athlete, professional or amateur, became the symbol of gentlemanly conduct in the heat of competitive battle." Walter Perry Johnson traveled a most curious and improbable circuitous route to his Major League Baseball debut, the stardom and the baseball immortality. He was born November 6, 1887, on a farm in Allen County, Kansas. The second of 6 siblings for Minnie and Frank Johnson. And as a child, for as long as he can remember, he helped his parents scratch out a living on their 160-acre farm. He was an outdoorsy boy whose lifelong passion in life was always hunting and fishing. Baseball really wasn't on his radar during his youth, as work on the farm monopolized most of his childhood time. Now, around the turn of the century, The Johnsons, they're forced to give up the farm due to the heavy droughts in Kansas, the Dust Bowl. I mean, nothing grows there. So, when Walter is in the 8th grade, the Johnsons moved from Humboldt, Kansas, where his father worked. They moved to Humboldt, Kansas, where his father worked odd jobs to put food on the table. Not long after settling down in Humboldt, his mother, Minnie, kept receiving word that her parents and siblings were all moving to the oil fields in Southern California. And here we are, folks, coming around the corner and out of that wormhole into the year of our Lord, 1902. Olinda, California, after years of struggle and poverty in Kansas, Frank, Minnie, and the Johnson unit packed their shit and joined the family migration in 1902, settling down in Olinda, California, where Frank found work as a teamster for the Santa Fe Oil Company. And between working on the Kansas farm and later in the oil fields of SoCal, Walter develops a strong, muscular 6'1" frame that fills out to 200 pounds at the age of 16. And this is when he begins to get his first taste of baseball. He begins playing on the California sandlots. And truth be told, he's a Roy Hobbs natural. He begins competing against dudes on a semi-pro team sponsored by the local oil company. Most of them are adults. And a local reporter wrote that Johnson was presented as a high school kid, but he is certainly a graduate in the science of throwing a baseball. The loosely organized SoCal Baseball League continued year-round, pitting town teams and company teams in these barnstorming tours against one another. And during the winter months, the roster could be augmented with major and minor leaguers looking to make some extra cash during the off-season. So over the next 3 years, this was his environment, and this was the environment that he used to hone his blossoming skills. For someone who began to play baseball at such a late stage in life, Johnson would readily admit that pitching was not of his doing, but a gift from God. From the very first time he held onto a ball, it settled right into his palm like it belonged there. And when I first threw it, the ball, wrist, hand, arm, and shoulder, it all worked together in harmony. And his pitching motion is unique in that he had a short windmill style windup, followed by this sweeping sidearm delivery. During his first part of his career, he relied almost exclusively on his explosive fastball. In 1913, 6 years after his Major League Baseball debut, he develops a nasty curveball. For 6 years, he's a one-pitch pitcher dominating the league. Think Mariano Rivera. But a starter. In April of 1906, a former teammate arranges a job for Walter with Tacoma in the Northwest League. And after one exhibition outing, he gets released. But another ex-teammate of his lands him a gig with the Weiser, a team in Idaho in the semi-pro Southern Idaho League for $90 a week. And $90 in 1906 extrapolated to the 2023 economy, it has the purchasing power of around $1,500 today. Pitching for Weiser that year, Walter goes 7-1 before returning home to Cali. In the second season for Weiser, Walter takes his game to another level, and he becomes the focal point of attention for teams throughout the majors when he goes 14-2 with a .55 ERA, striking out 214 batters and 146 innings pitched. Washington Senators manager Joe Cantillo. He begins receiving daily telegrams touting Johnson's pitching feats, and the wire services were spreading far and wide as the story of young Walter and his string of 77 consecutive scoreless innings, which included back-to-back no-nos. Chantillian sends injured catcher Cliff Blankenship to Idaho on a scouting trip and determines that the young phenom was everything he was billed to be. He persuades the 19-year-old Johnson to accept a Washington contract. And at first, Walter's reluctant to accept this offer, and he demands that a paid train ticket to return California be added as a provision to the deal, should he not make the grade and have to return home. And before he commits, he insists on wiring his parents to receive their blessing and permission to sign. And after a thumbs up by his parents, Walter signs the offer, and on July 22nd, 1907, damn near the whole town shows up at the Weiser Depot to see him off. A teary-eyed Johnson said goodbye to the town and his friends. A group of appreciative Weiser fans had tried to convince him to stay, offering to set him up with a cigar shop on the town square, and Walter politely thanked them and rebuffed the offer, saying later in life that at 19 years old, he wanted to see the world. And folks, I think this is where I'm going to take a break. When we get back, we'll talk about Walter and his many exploits while pitching for the Washington Senators. BRB freaks, please support the grassroots company that supports your grassroots baseball pod. Laparo's Hand Cleaners. No mo smelly hands. Don't go nowhere, Siemens.
Howdy, y'all. It's the Pod Squad, Gage Geek, executive producer of the Backwards K Pod. For the last few months, I've been telling you about our sponsor, Laparo's Hand Cleaners, a powerful trifecta of products that eliminates fish, seafood, and bait odors, as well as the spices on your hands from steamed crab and delicious crawfish boils. And now, this amazing grassroots company has added a buffalo wing hand cleaner. These are the only soaps and wipes on the planet specifically formulated to be used after eating spicy food or after a long day of fishing. Not only does the fish and hand cleaner get rid of bait funk, crawfish hand cleaner, wing hand cleaner, removes the spicy bubbles around your mouth and on your hands. An ingenious invention by a retired Navy shipmate of Jake, so he is family, folks. And one thing we do at the Let's Talk Baseball Podcast Network is take care of family. Till the end of September, Laparo's Hand Cleaner is offering all BKP listeners an amazing deal and hopes you give them a shot. It's a buy one, get one free deal, hot wing hand cleaner wipes, fishing hand cleaner wipes, or soap, seafood hand cleaner. Buy one, get one. We only advertise products on Backwards K-Pod that Jake and I believe in and use personally. After ripping up the golf course and watching football, there's nothing I love more than throwing some bait in the water and cracking a cold Bud Heavy. You can check out these amazing products by going to crawfishhandcleaners.com, or you can call the home offices at 713-588-0290. To get that BOGO deal, please use the code SUMMER23. For your fishing vacation you're planning, or the shellfish buffalo wing feast you're preparing, get yourself this groundbreaking product to protect you from smelly, spicy hands. That's crawfishhandcleaners.com, or call 713-588-0290. For the buy one, get one deal, use promo code SUMMER23. Fishing along the bank of your favorite river and listening to BKP sounds like a great idea. In fact, hey Mom, where are my poles at? I'm gone fishing.
Stadium, 70,000 ball fans, and a spellbinding moment between the two games of a Yankee-Washington doubleheader. For out of retirement comes the big train of baseball, Washington's Walter Johnson, co-starring once again with the mighty Babe Ruth, greatest drawing card in the history of the game. Supporting cast brings out catcher Benny Bengal and umpire Billy Evans. And baseball turns back its time-worn pages to 15 years ago. Johnson, the fastest fireball pitcher of them all, and the Sultan of Swat, who pulled 60 home runs for a season record that stands today. Ruth, now 48 years old, slowed up a little, but there's no denying the follow-through. Johnson is 55, not the blinding speed merchant, but they still cut the corners of the plate. For the crowd, there can be but one climax as the two baseball immortals face each other once again, and here it is. Into the spot called Ruthville, the right field stands, and the Bambino trods the circuit path with the old familiar music in his ears. But marks this indeed one of baseball's greatest days is its contribution to the Army-Navy Service Fund of more than $80,000. Yes, sir, it still takes the old-timers to do a bang-up job.
Wake up late, honey, put on your clothes and take your credit card to the liquor store. Well, that's one for you, a two for me, but tonight I'll be loaded like a freight train, flying like an aeroplane, feeling like a bass brain one more time tonight. I'm on the night train, I'm on the night train, fill my car. I'm on the night train, ready to crash and burn. I never learned. I'm on the night train.
Okay, welcome back, you seaman freaks. Before I stepped out, we basically covered the first act of Walter Johnson. We saw him come from humble beginnings in Kansas, the son of farmers who were basically chased away from their original place where they lived at. Because of the Dust Bowl, they emigrate to California, the oil fields of Southern Cali. And up to this point, you know, this is like he's 12 years old. He's never really had any experience in the game of baseball. He's more a hunter and a fisherman. Most of his spare time as a kid was spent on the farm doing chores. And he never had exposure to baseball until he gets to California. And from day one, the ball is like attracted to the palm of his hand. And he becomes a highly regarded and touted pitching prospect, I guess if you want to call it back then. And teams come sniffing around. And one thing I didn't tell you about in the first act, the Pirates were actually the first team to come sniffing around for Johnson here. And you may have thought it was funny that Walter asked the Senators for a train ticket home in case it didn't work. But the truth is, he asked the Pittsburgh Pirates for the same provision, and the Pirates were like, you know, they basically laughed him out of the building. They were like, no way, dude, we're not giving you that. If you don't make it, you got to find your own way home. So when the Senators came around, he was a little leery about going to the major leagues in the first place. But they basically tell him that, yes, we will give you a train ticket for your ride home if it doesn't work out. They were very secure in their decision to scout this 19-year-old kid right here. And the truth is, the Senators to this point had never finished higher than 6th place in the American League. Oh, and go back to that Pirates thing. It just crossed my mind. I mean, can you imagine the turn of the century and the Pirates have the best shortstop in the game, Honus Wagner, and they got the best pitcher in the game, and Walter Johnson. And, you know, butterfly peg moment. That little maneuver right there could have changed all of history. Instead of the Cubs, Red Sox, and the Philadelphia A's dominating, you know, and with, to some extent, the Giants dominating that first decade of the 1900s. You know, you put Walter Johnson, and and Hannes Wagner together, and you got to think, they went to the World Series anyway a couple times during the 1900s. The Pirates did. Can you imagine with Walter Johnson on that squad? So, butterfly effect moment. And the team that he does wind up signing for, the Washington Senators, well, to this point, they've never finished higher than 6th place in the American League. But from day one, Walter Johnson backed up his highly touted hype, and he found immediate success, posting a 1.88 ERA and 110 and a third innings pitched that rookie year. But it wasn't enough, as the Senators finished the 1907 season with a 49 and 102 record, 43 and a half games behind Ty Cobb and the Tigers, who would win the AL pennant that year. And Walter's presence in the Senators' rotation, it made very little difference in the team's success over the next 2 years. Well, even more than that, I guess, after improving to 7th place in 1908, the woeful Nats, as they were being called then, returned to the cellar in 1909, finishing with a 42 and 110 win-loss record, 56 and a half games out of first place, and 20 games behind the 7th place St. Louis Browns. And this was not on the head of Walter Johnson, although his personal win-loss record on the bump took a beating. Nowadays, the win-loss record is a minuscule metric in the totality of a pitcher's worth, but in 1909, it is the end-all, be-all for a pitcher and his brand. So, in 1909, I'm sure Walter is disappointed in his 13 and 25 record, but his 2.22 ERA during that dead ball season was better than league average, and his 164 strikeouts ranked second in the league. In 1908, Walter recorded one of the greatest stretches of pitching moments in the game's history over the Labor Day weekend. And with his pitching staff in shambles, manager Joe Cantillon sends the sturdy hurler to the mound in New York City for 3 consecutive starts over a 4-day period against the Highlanders. The Big Train destroyed the future Yankees ball club with 3 complete game shutouts. Not only did he twirl 3 consecutive shutouts, he got seemingly stronger and stronger and more impressive in each game of the series, giving up 6 hits in Game 1, 4 in Game 2, and only 2 in Game 3. The performance electrified the baseball universe, and Walter Johnson was becoming a household name in the conscience of, the typical seamhead of the early 1900s. In 1910, Walter posted a 25 and 17 record with a 1.36 ERA, 313 strikeouts. The Washington team improves to a 7th-place finish, and this would mark the beginning of a 10-year run that saw the big right-hander never finish under 20 victories for the season. Very impressive for a man who not only learned how to play the game so late in life, but he also played on some horrendously bad baseball teams. After his Labor Day weekend exploits in 2008, the baseball scribes began coining him the Big Train for the blinding velocity of his fastball. And during the 1910s, the Senators did earn some degree of respectability, finishing second in 1912 and 1913. In 1918, with the world at war with one another for the first time, the Senators are in a dogfight with the Boston Red Sox and Cleveland Indians for AL supremacy when the U.S. government issues a work or fight order, bringing the curtain down on the baseball season with Washington in 3rd place and only 4 games out of 1st place on Labor Day. And without question, the reason for Washington's incremental improvements during the second decade of the 1900s can directly be attributed to the hard-throwing Big Train. The franchise finishes in the 1910s with a team record of 755, 737 with a 507 winning percentage. And during that span, Walter goes 246 and 143 for a 650 winning percentage, as the rest of the Senators staff goes 490 and 737 for a 452 winning percentage. The fact that Walter lost 143 games during that span was due in large part to the mediocre bats and the Little League defense the club ran out on the field every single day. A fact that is magnified when you understand that Walter holds the baseball record for the number of 1-0 wins with 38, as well as the record for 1-0 losses with 26. So take that, Jacob deGrom. Walter's peak years were 1912 and 1913, and you gotta check these out. I mean, I just can't do justice. You gotta see him for yourself. His age, 24 and 25 years. He goes 33 and 12 and 36 and 7, respectively, winning a Chalmers automobile in 1913 as the American League MVP. And by now, he has attained fame, and he's been admired throughout the baseball universe, not only for his top-shelf liquor abilities and his fierce competitiveness, but also for the modesty, humility, and dignity that he exemplified and conducted himself with. Today, he would be considered boring to the new breed of seamheads. He never pounded his chest after striking out the 8-hole hitter. He never pointed at the sky in fake bravado after doing his fucking job. He never argued or glared at an umpire about a missed strike call. He never used foreign substances in an era when the spitter was legal. Just the arm and baseball acumen that God gave him late in life. And he figured that's going to suffice. At a time when the MLB baseball fraternity was filled with drunken ruffians, Walter was never involved in a brawl. He never cussed, and he didn't patronize waterhole saloons of the day. In fact, he kind of got this reputation for a guy who takes it easy. Meaning, he was a fierce warrior, competitive warrior as you'll ever find, but he also had a gentle side to him. He didn't want to embarrass his friends. In fact, Ty Cobb, who I mentioned at the beginning of the show, talks about how the baseball is hissing past him, right? But Ty Cobb learned to exploit that fastball, and Ty Cobb would crowd the plate because he knew that Walter Johnson was such a gentleman. He would never in a million years come inside high and tight and buzz his tower. So Cobb exploited him and would, often crowd the plate. He was a very gentle, classy dude. And during the summer of 1913, Walter meets the love of his life, Hazel Lee Roberts, the daughter of a Nevada. What is it, Nevada or Nevada? I think it's Nevada, right? But anyway, she's the daughter of a Nevada congressman. In 1914, their romance becomes the tabloid talk of the day in Washington society. The couple ties their nuptials and they're married June 24th, 1914, with the chaplain of the U.S. Senate officiating. The two would have 6 children, 5 of whom would live to adulthood. His 10-year run of 20 or more wins is snapped in 1920 when he encounters a bad cold, a sore arm, pulled hamstrings, which limit the stud to an 8-10 mark in 21 appearances. And he did manage to toss the first and only no-no of his career at the Boston Red Sox on July 1st. And even though his health and overall stuff did return in 1921, which sees him go 17-14, Off-field tragedy hits home for the legend as his father, Frank, dies of a stroke in July, and his 2-year-old daughter, Eleanor, dies from influenza in December. And with the horrific memories of these two haunting his psyche, Walter and Hazel sell their farm and decide to move to Bethesda, Maryland as their year-round residence. Walter decided to make 1924 his 18th season in the majors, his swan song into retirement. His plan was to return to Cali and become an owner in the vaunted Pacific Coast League. But Senators owner Clark Griffith had finally assembled a team that was worthy of complimenting their ace. And for the first time in franchise history, the Washington Senators had captured the AL crown and pennant. And a rejuvenated Big Train, buoyed by his new talented teammates surrounding him. I mean, he's locked in all year. He goes 23-7. He wins his second AL MVP. Leads the league in wins, ERA, strikeouts, and shutouts. Game 1 of the 1924 World Series sees the Big Train squaring off against John McGraw and his New York Giants at Griffith Stadium in the nation's capital. And it met the pregame hype, as it is still one of the most dramatic Game 1s in World Series history. Walter pitches well, but he loses 4-3 in 12 innings pitched. And Game 5, obviously still affected by the 165-pitch performance he delivered in the series opener, the Big Train sputters in the quirky Polo Grounds, losing 6-2 behind his lackluster showing. And the Senators are now 1 game away from losing the series as the Giants take a 3-2 advantage, and it looks as though Walter may never throw another pitch in the World Series. His chances to capture the elusive World Series chip may never happen again for him. This team is his best and possibly last chance. In Game 6, Walter watches from the bench as his team rallies for a 2-1 victory behind the pitching of Tom Zachary to set the stage for Game 7 in the district. And on a beautiful Indian summer of an afternoon, as the cheers and ovations from the game echo across the D.C. landscape, the hometown crowd becomes even louder when they see their iconic hero making his way to the Senators' bully from the dugout in the 6th inning. After player-manager Bucky Harris, he actually hits a home run to open the game in the 4th inning. Then he ties the game at 3s with his clutch single in the bottom of the 8th. And going into the top of the 9th, he waits on the mound, and he calls for the Big Train. And when Walter climbs that hill and takes that ball from Bucky, the skipper tells him, "You're the best we got, Walter. We're going to win or lose with you." And Walter calmly takes the orb into his hands, and in his usual unflappable stoic way, he proceeds to carve up the Giants, pitching 4 scoreless innings that saw the crafty vet pitch his way into and out of one jam after another before the horrified and thrilled Senators faithful. Twice after intentionally walking Ross Young, he struck out Major League RBI champ George Kelly. And he did that twice. Talk about knowing where your outs are in the lineup, right? In the bottom of the 12th, Earl McNeely's grounded to third. It hits a pebble, and it bounces over the head of Giants third baseman Freddie Lindstrom, and then it dribbles into left field, scoring Muddy Ruel, and the Washington Senators secured their first and only World Series title in franchise history. With the Big Train awash in the glow of this world title aftermath, Walter returns home to Olinda, California, He pitches an exhibition game versus his good friend Babe Ruth. He visits some Hollywood movie studios, and he's also hard at work trying to procure ownership of a team in the PCL. And after his purchase venture collapses, he decides to return to Washington for another big league campaign as a defending champion. The Senators have a superb 1925 season. They win the pennant handily, and the Big Train delivered the last 20 wins season of his career. He also set the single-season record for highest batting average for a pitcher that still stands today, 433. So eat your heart out, Shohei Ohtani. Another unbreakable record set by Train. When you consider, we live in the age of the universal DH, right? So 433 in a season by a pitcher, that's going to stand forever. However, the 1925 World Series did not see the same results as the year before. This time, Washington would square off versus the Pittsburgh Pirates. And after dominating the Buccos in games 1 and 2 by the final score of 4-1 and 4-0, the Senators, with Walter on the mound, they lose 9-7 in Game 7 on a rainy, muddy day in the Berg. A game that most assuredly would not have been played today. After 1927, the Big Train called it a career and began managing a ball club in Newark, New Jersey in the International League. A year after that, he returns to the district where he serves as a manager for 4 seasons. He also managed the Cleveland Indians from 1933 to 1935, where he was constantly attacked by the local press as being too easygoing with the players, even though he had an overall winning percentage of .550 as a manager. He was just a good guy, That's all. On August 1st, 1930, Walter suffers the biggest tragedy of his life when his wife Hazel, at the young age of 36, dies as a result of heat exhaustion she suffered on a cross-country drive during one of the hottest summers on record. After the loss of his wife, Walter descends into the black clouds of melancholy, darkening what should have been his happy, tranquil years of retirement on his Mountain View farms on the Maryland countryside, as arguably the greatest pitcher in baseball history. During the later years, Walter kept busy on the farm. He served as a Montgomery County commissioner. He was brought back by the Senators to broadcast their games on the radio in 1939, and he made an unsuccessful bid when he ran as a Republican for a seat in the U.S. Congress. On June 12, 1939, Walter, Ruth Cobb, Hannes Wagner, and Christy Mathewson become the first and by far the greatest class to ever be inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. During World War II, he made several brief playing appearances in war bond games, including serving up pitches to Ruth in Yankee Stadium. They got clips of that on YouTube with no sound, if you're interested in checking that out. And, both men are, they're older. Babe's like 48. I believe Walter is 55. And it's a lot of give and take. Purely exhibition, but the the Bambino does hit a blast that nearly clears the stadium. After an illness of several months caused by a brain tumor, Walter Johnson dies at the age of 59 on December 10th, 1946. And he is buried next to Hazel at Union Cemetery in Rockville, Maryland. No one in the game could match his velocity during his era. Through science and technology of today, we now know he threw around 93 consistently, and he would top out around 95, which is about average in today's game, but it was unheard of in his time. And, these dudes are swinging like 44-ounce clubs, right? The tall, barrel-chested hurler with his right hand winding up, slinging the ball sidearm like he was skipping stones across the Potomac River. with very little hip and ass. The spear would explode from his hand like a big train racing down the tracks. He is one of the few segregated Major League Baseball pitchers of the 20th century that I believe could compete in today's game. No problem. I know that 93-mile-per-hour fastball is not going to stand on its own today, but I have to consider that Johnson was a sidearmer. They tend to pitch slower on an average, and I did the research. For anyone who's interested, Jake Diekman would be the only sidearm in the league today who throws harder than him. And Big Train had good control. He had a nasty curve that he developed. He was a great athlete. For me, he probably has the best chance of any pre-World War II pitcher to be a force in today's game. For me, well, look, I would have him in my 20th century pre-integration Major League Baseball pitchers Mount Rushmore. Along with Christy Mathewson, Eddie Plank, Lefty Gomez, I think. I don't know, what do you guys think? Hit me up. Give me your opinion on the 20th century pre-integration Major League Baseball pitchers Mount Rushmore. And you can't put Cy Young on there. He didn't play in the 1900s. So, I think that's what I'm going to call it, freaks. I really enjoyed the work and the research that went into the Big Train pod. Much like Jimmy Fox a few weeks ago, most of my knowledge about Walter was superficial and on the surface, and I'm proud to have this platform and audience to deliver this legend's journey from Humboldt, Kansas, to Olinda, California, to Cooperstown, New York, now Washington, D.C., and beyond. Yeah, thanks for joining me this week, and I promise, folks, I'll be back in the cage tomorrow trying to be better for you next week. Before I dip, let's take a trip and marvel at the amazing career stats from this one-of-a-kind pitcher, Walter Perry Johnson, born November 6, 1887 in Humboldt, Kansas. So Walter Johnson, nicknamed the Big Train as well as Barney after race car driver Barney Oldfield. He is officially 136 years old and one day upon the drop of this show into the baseball universe. He went to Fullerton Union High School in Fullerton, California. Was the 2,950th player to ever play Major League Baseball when he makes his debut on August 2nd, 1907. 20-year MLB career, all with the Washington Senators. And boy, oh boy, where do I begin? Buckle up your chin strap, buttercup, and breathe it in, freaks. 165.1 WAR, which is the second highest, behind only his good friend George Herman. His 152.4 pitching WAR is second only to Denton True, Cy Young. He appeared in 808 games, the 52nd most for any pitcher. He started in 666 of those games, the 13th most starts ever. 23,415 batters faced, the third most ever in the game. 5,914 innings pitched, the game's third highest total. A .417.279 win-loss record. So, those 417 wins are the second most wins by a pitcher, and that's, of course, behind Cy Young and his 5'11", which we all agree will never be broken. Well, I got news for you folks. Walter in his second place finish at .417, it ain't going nowhere either. His 279 losses are fourth on the list, behind Cy Young, Pud Galvin, and Nolan Ryan. And I'm so old, I remember living in a baseball universe when Walter Johnson had the most strikeouts ever. His 3,509 Ks stood as a benchmark for 64 years until Steve Carlton, Nolan Ryan, and Gaylord Perry passed him in the 1983 season. He is now ranked 9th all-time in strikeouts. Of the 18 pitchers in the 3,000 strikeout club, he pitched the most innings and has the lowest strikeouts per 9. A career 2.17 ERA, 12th best. 110 shutouts, the most in the history of baseball. That's never being broken. ERA plus of 1.7, the 10th best in the game ever. 2.38 FIP, 12th best, 1.06 WHIP. I mean, it's just absurd. 5 pitching titles, 1912, 1913, 1918, 1919, 1924. 3-time pitcher's Triple Crown winner, 1913, 1918, 1924. 1913 and 1924, AL MVP. He led the league in strikeouts 12 times. The most ever by anyone. The only man who has ever come close is Nolan Ryan with 11. In 1936, Johnson is one of the original 5 inaugural members to be inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, seamheads of all ages, this is the story of the big train, Walter Johnson. JFC. I was getting a little overwhelming, regurgitating those stats at you. Thank you, C-Mets, for joining me this week. I feel like I've accomplished my goals. Painted this blank audio canvas the way I wanted. So, Vinny Bassi, I came, I saw, I kicked its ass. BKP is available on all platforms, wherever you listen to your shows. I'm there. I'm all tangled up in the web, brah. Please share with your seamhead buddies. Rate and review as you see fit. I ain't scared. I do what I do when I do it, and I do it better than anyone else. I will never charge you freaks for the baseball content. No Patreon, no Twitch, no pay-to-play subscriptions. I'm just going to keep coming through every Tuesday with that free baseball smoke.
You don't want that smoke.
And I'm going to keep it consistent like Corey Seager. That dude is a monster. And speaking of monsters, as I get you Siemens back to your loved ones at Terrapin Station, I see the big train getting smaller and smaller in my rear view. So I turn my attention to our never say die baseball hydra. I grab my katana from under my kimono and I chop the head off that beast, only to see 2 more baseball topics appear in its place. Next week, we're going to go from the most dominant pitcher of the segregated era to probably one of the most dominant pitchers the baseball universe has ever known. Next week, oh man, I can't wait. Next week, I bring you Hall of Famer, member of the Black Aces, the incomparable Bob Gibson. Gibby, folks. I truly can't wait to start the work on it. But look, that's another story for another pod here at Backwards K-Pod, where we collect ball players and their stories. Parents, if you see your kids sitting on the couch like a bored AF, winter is coming. You still got time, though. Take those little monkeys outside and play a game of catch. Thank y'all for coming out. God bless and win the day. And like my boy Shea Hillenbrand told me in our one-on-one sparring session in the dojo last year, you go to hell, Andy Pettit. Thanks for dropping by, freaks. We got Gibby next week. I'm throwing up my Gunnar Hendersons to all of you freaks. My deuces. Peace.